I thought going home for Thanksgiving would feel comforting. Instead, it felt like stepping into a nightmare. The brick red two-story house in Queens, the one my grandparents Walter and Margaret built with their bare hands, was gone. Erased from our family without a single word to me. My parents, Richard and Patricia, smiled as if nothing had happened, while my brother Ethan bragged about the brand new Tesla Model X parked outside, a $71,000 toy bought with the money from that house. I sat there, stunned, holding back tears, wondering how the people who raised me could betray me so deeply. Would you forgive your parents if they sold your childhood home just to spoil your sibling? And that was only the beginning. I grew up believing that the brick red house in Queens would always be mine to return to. It wasn't just a building, it was the backdrop of every memory that mattered. My grandparents, Walter and Margaret Davis, weren't wealthy, but they built that house with their own hands after decades of saving. It had two narrow stories, a staircase that squeaked at every step, and a front porch where I spent humid New York summers eating popsicles that dripped down my wrists. Every Thanksgiving, the smell of my grandmother's pumpkin pie mixed with the sound of my grandfather's deep laugh. That house wasn't just wood and paint. It was where I learned what family could be when kindness still existed. But kindness rarely lasted long inside my own household. My parents, Richard and Patricia Collins, were experts at favoritism. Ethan, my younger brother, was the golden child. From the day he was born, the spotlight belonged to him. He could spill soda on the carpet, break my toys, or talk back, and they would laugh as if he was charming. When I made one small mistake, forgetting to unload the dishwasher, or staying out 10 minutes past curfew, I was lectured for hours. I tried to swallow the unfairness, reminding myself that at least my grandparents saw me. My bedroom in that house became my corner of safety. The walls were painted pale yellow by Grandma when I turned 8. I remember sticking glow-in-the-dark stars to the ceiling, imagining a future where family meant support instead of constant comparison. My mom tucked Ethan in at night with kisses and stories, while I usually got a reminder to set my alarm early for school. The double standard was obvious, but I told myself it didn't matter. I learned not to ask for much because asking usually ended in disappointment. Even simple things showed the gap between us. Ethan got a new bike for Christmas. I got hand-me-down shoes. When he wanted expensive Starbucks lattes, Mom happily swiped her card. If I wanted one, I had to cover the $6 from my own babysitting money. At 13, I was tutoring neighborhood kids to buy school supplies while Ethan was being chauffeured to soccer practice. The imbalance wasn't just occasional, it was stitched into the fabric of our daily lives. As I grew older, that house in Queens anchored me. When I moved to Brooklyn to start my teaching career, I often drove past the old place whenever life felt heavy. On bad days, I'd park across the street just to stare at those familiar red bricks and feel grounded again. I told myself it didn't matter if my parents played favorites. That house at least was proof that part of my family's love was still mine. It carried my childhood, my grandparents' sacrifices, and every piece of belonging I thought no one could take away. Or so I believed. The favoritism in my family didn't fade as Ethan and I grew older. If anything, it grew louder, clearer, impossible to ignore. When Ethan turned 16, my parents surprised him with a used Jeep Liberty, a shiny silver one that still smelled like leather. I remember standing on the driveway in my worn sneakers, clapping because everyone else was clapping, while my heart twisted. When I turned 16, I got bus passes and a lecture about being responsible. They said girls didn't need cars because someone will always drive you. Birthdays became annual reminders of the gap. Ethan got parties at restaurants with balloons, gift cards, and a new iPhone once. My 17th birthday was marked with a single cake at home and a sweater my mom found on clearance at Macy's. They said money was tight, but somehow, money always loosened up when Ethan asked. At Christmas, he unwrapped a new PlayStation while I opened a box of socks. I learned to smile politely, though my chest burned with humiliation. The unfairness showed up at school, too. When Ethan's grades slipped, my parents blamed the teachers. They hired tutors and told him he was destined for greatness. When I brought home straight A's, I got a shrug. My dad once told me, grades don't matter as much for girls, you'll have a husband to lean on. I wanted to scream, but instead I buried myself in homework, hoping achievements would one day even the scales. college applications made the favoritism undeniable. I worked nights at a diner to pay application fees. Ethan had his paid up front. When I got accepted into a respected program, my parents didn't even visit the campus with me. When Ethan barely got into a community college, they bought him dorm furniture and threw a barbecue to celebrate. He dropped out after one semester, but they still called him their bright future. I was left to commute 2 hours each way from Brooklyn, clinging to scholarships and extra shifts. Even little luxuries reminded me of the imbalance. Ethan came home with Starbucks in hand nearly every morning, a venti caramel latte my mom gladly covered at $6 a cup. When I wanted one, she rolled her eyes, telling me not to waste money. He wore new Nikes every season. I wore Payless flats until the soles split. It wasn't about the things themselves, it was about what those things shouted. Ethan mattered, I didn't. Through all of it, I tried to convince myself that the house in Queens would balance things. My grandparents built it with both of us in mind. I believed, foolishly, that no matter how uneven life felt, one day that house would prove I still belonged. That house was supposed to be untouchable. But I was wrong. I came home for Thanksgiving that year with a heavy bag of papers to grade and the hope that maybe, just maybe, being around family would feel less exhausting. The drive from Brooklyn to Long Island took nearly 2 hours, and I tried to calm my nerves by sipping a pumpkin spice latte from Starbucks. I pulled into the driveway expecting to see the familiar sight of my parents' modest home decorated with orange lights and a plastic turkey on the lawn. Instead, the first thing that caught my eye was a brand new Tesla Model X gleaming white under the porch lights. License plate still temporary. Ethan stood beside it, grinning ear to ear like a game show winner. "Pretty sweet, right?" he called out before I even had the chance to shut off my car. Mom and Dad thought I deserved an upgrade. I froze. The last time I had visited, my parents were talking about how money was too tight to fix the broken dishwasher. Now a $71,000 car sat in their driveway with a red bow on top. I forced a smile, but inside my chest burned with suspicion. At dinner, the truth surfaced in the most casual way, as if it didn't matter. Over turkey, cranberry sauce, and a $38 bottle of California wine, my father cleared his throat and said, "We decided it was time to sell the old house in Queens. It just made sense. Too much upkeep." My fork slipped against the plate. "What house?" I asked, though I already knew. "The Davis house," my mother said, reaching for the gravy as if she was discussing the weather. "We sold it for $835,000. It was the practical thing to do." My ears rang. I had driven past that house only weeks earlier, still convinced it was safe, untouchable. "You sold it?" My voice cracked. My parents exchanged a glance. Ethan leaned back, swirling his glass of wine like some smug king. "Relax, Hannah," he said. "It's not like you were ever going to use it. Besides, they wanted me to have a strong start. The Tesla was just part of the plan." The table erupted in praise for him. How responsible he looked behind the wheel. How successful he was destined to become. No one looked at me. I sat there, my hands trembling in my lap, realizing my grandparents' legacy had been erased without my consent. The house that anchored me, the one place that gave me a sense of belonging, was gone. I chewed slowly, swallowing not just turkey but rage. My parents smiled like nothing was wrong, as if betraying me was as natural as breathing. I stared at the Tesla through the window, headlights reflecting back like cruel reminders. And in that moment, I knew they hadn't just sold a house, they had sold me out. The dining room was filled with the smell of roasted turkey, buttery mashed potatoes, and cinnamon pie, but none of it touched me. I sat at the far end of the long oak table, clutching my napkin so tightly that it shredded in my hands. Ethan dominated the entire room. He leaned back in his chair, describing every feature of his Tesla Model X. The falcon wing doors, the autopilot, even the heated seats that, according to him, were better than anything a cheap car could ever give. My parents hung on every word, smiling so wide you'd think he had cured cancer. I stared at my plate. The turkey was perfectly golden. The cranberry sauce glistened under the chandelier, but each bite tasted bitter. My mother leaned forward, pearls around her neck catching the light. "We're just so proud of Ethan," she said. "He finally has the chance to prove himself. The house money gave him a real future." I swallowed hard. "What about my future?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. Silence fell for a moment, broken only by the clink of silverware. Then my father cleared his throat. Hannah, you've always been independent. You don't need handouts. You have your teaching job. You'll manage. His tone was not kind. It was final, dismissive. Ethan smirked, sipping his wine like a king at his coronation. Yeah, Hannah, you don't even like driving. Besides, the old place was falling apart. Be grateful they did something smart with it. Laughter spread across the table. My aunt chuckled. My uncle added, that house was outdated anyway. I sat frozen, watching as years of my grandparents' sacrifice were reduced to a punchline. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand on the table and remind them that I had worked every summer job possible just to afford college applications while Ethan's were paid for without question. I wanted to tell them that the house wasn't crumbling. It was history, memory, family. But the words lodged in my throat. My silence had always been mistaken for weakness, and they expected me to accept this betrayal like all the others. My father lifted his glass. To Ethan, he declared, to the future of the Collins family. Everyone raised their glasses. Cheers erupted. Not one person looked at me. Not one acknowledged what had been stolen. It was as if I didn't exist. Dessert arrived, pumpkin pie topped with whipped cream. I tasted none of it. Instead, I watched the Tesla through the frosted window, its headlights glowing like cruel eyes staring back at me. My hands trembled, but beneath the anger was something sharper, resolve. They believed they had silenced me. They believed selling the house erased my place in the family. They had no idea what was coming. The clinking of glasses still echoed in my ears as I pushed my chair back from the table. My heart pounded so loud I thought everyone could hear it, but my face stayed calm. Years of being overlooked had taught me how to mask fury behind silence. Tonight, though, silence was over. I reached into my bag, resting on the floor beside my chair. My fingers brushed against the cold edge of a SanDisk USB drive. Slowly, I pulled out my MacBook Air, the slim silver case gleaming under the chandelier. Conversations faltered. My relatives glanced at one another, whispering. Ethan laughed. What's this, Hannah? Gonna show us a slideshow of your students? I ignored him. My hands moved with precision, plugging in the USB, opening the document I had safeguarded for years. The screen glowed with scanned pages of my grandparents' will. My voice cut through the chatter. This is the original will of Walter and Margaret Davis. It clearly states that the house in Queens must be divided equally between both grandchildren. Both. The room went still. Forks froze in midair. My mother's face drained of color. My father's jaw tightened. Ethan rolled his eyes. That's fake, obviously. I scrolled to the notarized seal, the signatures, the date stamped nearly 20 years ago. This isn't fake, I said, my voice firm. It's legally binding, and you knew it. You sold that house behind my back even though you had no right. Whispers filled the room. My aunt leaned over, peering at the screen. It looks real, she murmured. My uncle shifted uncomfortably. No one laughed now. My father tried to recover. Hannah, you don't understand how complicated things were. We needed to simplify the estate. By erasing me? I snapped. The years of swallowed resentment rose like a tidal wave. By pretending your daughter didn't exist so your son could drive a $71,000 car? Ethan slammed his wine glass onto the table. Enough. You're jealous. You've always been jealous. That house was falling apart. Nobody cared about it but you. I met his glare. Grandma and Grandpa cared. They cared enough to make sure it would be shared. They cared enough to write it down, to sign it, to leave me something when you all never did. Silence stretched across the table. My mother's lips trembled. My father looked down, his face hard but his eyes uncertain. For the first time I saw cracks in their confidence. I closed the laptop softly, the click louder than any shout. You wanted to pretend I was powerless, I said. But I'm not powerless, and this is only the beginning. The headlights of Ethan's Tesla shone through the window like a spotlight on his shame. The same relatives who had laughed minutes ago now sat frozen, unable to look at me. And for the first time that night, I felt the balance shift. The silence in the dining room was suffocating. My parents sat rigid, my father's knuckles white against the table, my mother gripping her pearls as if they could anchor her. Ethan's smug grin faltered, but he forced a laugh. Nobody's gonna believe that piece of paper. You probably typed it yourself last night. I didn't blink. Funny you say that, I replied, sliding another folder out of my bag. Because this is a certified copy from the Queens County Clerk's office, stamped, sealed, verified. I opened the folder so everyone could see the embossed seal glinting under the light. Gasps rippled across the table. My mother's voice wavered. Hannah, where did you even... I protected it, I cut in, because deep down I always knew you would try to erase me, and I wasn't going to let that happen. Ethan shoved his chair back, his voice rising. This is ridiculous. Nobody here cares about some old will. The house was falling apart. Dad and Mom made the right call. End of story. Before I could respond, a calm voice came from the doorway. Actually, it's not the end of the story. All heads turned as Laura Bennett, my attorney, stepped into the room. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, a leather briefcase in hand, she looked completely out of place in the chaos, but exactly where she needed to be. I watched my parents pale. They hadn't expected backup. Laura, I said evenly, would you care to explain? She set the briefcase on the table, snapping it open with deliberate precision. This will is valid and enforceable. The property was not yours to sell unilaterally. By law, Hannah is entitled to half the estate. Any transaction completed without her consent can be challenged and potentially voided. Whispers exploded. My aunt gasped. My uncle muttered, "This could go to court." Ethan slammed his fist onto the table. Court? Over what? She's family. Why would she drag us into court? Laura's eyes narrowed. Because you left her no choice. You benefited from fraud. That Tesla you're so proud of? Bought with money that legally belongs to her. All color drained from Ethan's face. He stammered, They gave it to me. I didn't... Intent doesn't erase illegality, Laura interrupted. Her voice was calm, but sharp enough to cut glass. My father tried to regain control, his tone harsh. We're not airing family business in front of outsiders. But the damage was done. The room that had cheered Ethan minutes ago now buzzed with suspicion, shame, and disbelief. Relatives avoided his eyes. My mother stared down at her untouched pumpkin pie. My father pressed his lips together, defeated. I leaned back in my chair, my heartbeat steady for the first time that night. You thought selling the house erased me. You thought spoiling Ethan would silence me. But the law doesn't play favorites. Outside, the Tesla's headlights flickered as if mocking him. Inside, the weight of truth crashed down. This was no longer just a family fight. It was a legal battle they couldn't win. The moment Laura's words sank in, the room seemed to tilt. My parents sat stunned, their faces ashen, while Ethan's bravado dissolved into stammering protests. For years I had swallowed every slight, every dismissal, every reminder that I was second best. But now, with the law on my side and every eye in the room on them, I finally felt the power shift. I closed my laptop and slipped the certified will back into its folder. You had choices, I said, my voice steady. You could have respected Grandma and Grandpa's wishes. You could have asked me. Instead, you erased me from my own family. That ends tonight. My father bristled, his jaw clenched. You wouldn't dare drag us into court. Family doesn't sue family. I met his glare. Family doesn't sell a house for $835,000 behind their daughter's back. Family doesn't hand over $71,000 in luxury cars to one child while telling the other she'll manage. My words echoed louder than his protest. Laura slid a packet of documents across the table. I've already prepared the paperwork. Hannah's claim is legitimate. If necessary, we'll be filing with the Albany State Court first thing Monday morning. Gasps circled the table. Ethan shoved his chair back so violently it scraped against the hardwood. You're pathetic, Hannah. What kind of sister sues her own parents? I stood, meeting his rage with calm resolve. The kind of daughter who's done being invisible. My mother's lip trembled. She whispered, We were only trying to give him a head start. I shook my head. No, you were trying to rewrite our family. You were trying to erase me, but I'm not going anywhere. The relatives who had laughed earlier now sat in uncomfortable silence, shifting in their chairs. No one defended my parents. No one cheered for Ethan. For the first time, the narrative belonged to me. I gathered my things, sliding the USB drive into my bag. This isn't about revenge, I said. It's about justice, and if you won't give it willingly, the court will. Ethan muttered curses under his breath, but his voice shook. My father looked older than I had ever seen him, his authority crumbling in real time. My mother wiped at her eyes, but I felt no sympathy, not tonight. As I walked toward the door, I heard Laura's voice behind me, calm and firm. You can either cooperate and resolve this fairly, or you can fight and lose. The choice is yours. I stepped outside into the crisp November air. The Tesla sat in the driveway, white paint gleaming, a monument to their betrayal. For a brief second, I almost laughed at the irony. That car bought with stolen legacy might soon be the evidence that unraveled them. For once, the future no longer felt stacked against me. For once, I held the cards. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I walked into the Albany State Court with Laura by my side, documents tucked neatly inside her leather briefcase. The building smelled faintly of old paper and polished floors, a far cry from the warmth of my grandparents' house, yet strangely comforting. Filing the lawsuit felt like closing a door that had been left wide open for too long. For once, I wasn't begging my parents to see me, I was demanding it from the law. Weeks passed. The case moved forward, and with every hearing, my parents looked smaller. Ethan stopped posting photos with the Tesla on Instagram, probably after realizing people whispered behind his back about where the money came from. My relatives who once laughed at me now sent texts saying I had no idea. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. It didn't erase the years of favoritism, but it gave me something I'd never felt before: validation. When the judgment finally arrived, it was clear the sale was improper. Half the proceeds from the Queen's house legally belonged to me. After years of being treated as invisible, the court had written my name where my family had tried to erase it. I walked out of the courthouse into the biting winter wind, but I felt lighter than ever. With my share of the settlement, I bought a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn Heights. The price tag, $1.12 million, would have terrified me once, but signing the papers felt like reclaiming the future I was owed. The apartment overlooked the Manhattan skyline, a glittering reminder that I was building a life on my own terms. I furnished it with care: a second-hand leather couch, shelves stacked with books my students recommended, a small dining table where I could finally host friends without fear of judgment. Every morning before school, I stopped at Starbucks and bought myself a pumpkin spice latte. It wasn't just coffee, it was proof that I could enjoy small luxuries without guilt, without being told I was wasting money. Sometimes I'd walk past a Coach store, run my fingers over the handbags, and smile, not because I needed one, but because I could buy it if I wanted to. That freedom was intoxicating. My students noticed a change in me too. One girl said, "Ms. Collins, you seem happier lately." And she was right. For the first time, I wasn't carrying the invisible weight of trying to earn my parents' approval. I had given myself permission to matter. On quiet evenings, I sat by my apartment window, sipping wine and watching the city lights flicker. I thought of my grandparents, Walter and Margaret, and whispered a thank you into the dark. Their house might be gone, but their legacy was alive in me. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving, and no one, not my parents, not Ethan, not anyone, could take that away again. The judgment didn't just alter the balance of money. It rewrote the way my family was seen in every circle they once valued. Within weeks, the Collins name became something neighbors whispered about. My father, Richard, had spent decades building the image of a steady, reliable man. At church, he had always shaken hands in the front pew, quoting scripture about honor and sacrifice. After the lawsuit, people avoided his eye. The same men who once respected him now whispered that he had cheated his own daughter. His pride, once solid as concrete, cracked with every sideways glance. My mother, Patricia, shrank even faster. She had loved to display herself as the perfect hostess, serving casseroles, polishing pearls, and bragging about Ethan's latest toys, but gossip turned against her. Women who once sipped coffee in her kitchen now ignored her calls. At the supermarket, the friendly chatter vanished. People ducked into aisles to avoid conversation. Even her beloved book club quietly folded without inviting her back. Each social rejection reminded her that favoritism, once her weapon, had become her disgrace. Ethan's downfall was the most visible. The Tesla Model X, the shining symbol of his superiority, was repossessed. Watching it hauled away on a flatbed drew a crowd of curious neighbors. Some recorded on their phones, uploading clips with captions like "Golden Boy loses his golden toy." His Instagram, once packed with staged selfies and flashy purchases, went silent. Friends who once envied him now mocked him. Employers Googled his name and turned him away. He became a man defined not by privilege but by scandal. Holidays at the Collins house turned hollow. That Christmas, instead of a crowded table filled with relatives, it was just Richard, Patricia, and Ethan eating quietly at a table set for ghosts. No one came, no gifts were exchanged. The silence weighed heavier than any lecture I had ever endured. I didn't celebrate their collapse, but I couldn't ignore the symmetry. For years they erased me. Now the world erased them. Justice had found its way home. When I look back on everything, I no longer feel the desperate ache for approval that once consumed me. For years, I told myself that being a good daughter meant staying quiet, smiling through the hurt, and accepting less. But silence never bought me love. It only gave my parents permission to erase me. What finally gave me peace was standing up, even when it meant standing alone. Justice didn't arrive with cheering crowds. It came in paperwork, courtrooms, and long nights of doubt. Yet with every step, I realized that reclaiming my voice mattered more than any inheritance. My grandparents' legacy was never just the house in Queens. Their true gift was resilience, the belief that dignity is worth defending, even when your own family tries to take it away. That realization freed me in ways I can't fully describe. Now, each morning when I wake in my Brooklyn Heights apartment, I feel something I never felt in that childhood home: safety. I brew my coffee, open my curtains to the Manhattan skyline, and remind myself that I'm no longer living in someone else's shadow. I am no longer the forgotten daughter. I am Hannah Collins, and I am enough. But I want to ask you, if your parents sold your childhood home for nearly $1 million and gave everything to your sibling, leaving you with nothing, what would you do? Would you fight back? Would you risk breaking the family apart to claim your share? Or would you stay silent, hoping time would fix what betrayal had destroyed? This was my true revenge story, and if you've ever lived through favoritism or betrayal, I hope it reminds you that silence is not your only option. If this story touched you, please like this video, subscribe to Heartless Revenge, and share your own thoughts below. And if you want to hear more family revenge stories just like this one, check out our playlist. Your story might be next.